And then we have a special guest with us this morning, Dave Clarke from Quinnipiac University. Good morning, Dave, and welcome.
How you doing, John?
Thanks for taking the time to sit down and answer a couple of questions and give us some insight to your day-to-day with your full-time gig there at Quinnipiac, and also your jobs on the side with US Soccer and Club. I suppose the best way to start is to ask you about your coaching pathway and where it all started and how it got going.
I think you have to go back. My dad was a pro in England, and he was part of that generation that left Ireland in the 50s and grew and went to England. Didn't have a formal education, so he was always one of those that was saying, the dream was always to play in England, but he advised and counseled me on the fact that you needed to have a fallback. So if you couldn't play the game, make sure you could do something else in it. So be a coach, referee, administrator. The importance of education came into play too. So while a lot of my teammates at Belvedere were going away to England, that was never the option for me, with the way that my dad had sort of instilled the importance of staying in school. Fortunately, now when I look back, I was out injured for 2 years, key years at U15 and U16. But in that time, Belvedere, Vincent Butler, Noel O'Reilly, Fergus McCabe, people like that White took me under their wing and said, they knew I was obsessed with the game. So rather than just sitting at home, being in hospital and sitting on the sidelines and not being able to do anything, they got me into coaching. So I started to watch the sessions, sit in on their meetings, and got exposure to a lot of things. Vincent was the coach of the Irish U15s at the time. Noel was the assistant with Tui with the youth. So just in that period, like 84, 85 or so, just to have that insight into what they were doing in games away. So at 15, I was already sort of on a track to get into coaching, way ahead of my peers at that time. And then obviously I came over here to Central to do a degree, but prior to that I'd been on the first ANCO FAI, which then became the FOSS course. So working with Pat Cleary, that came through Fergus McCabe as well. So for 1.5 to 2 years, I was full-time in coaching, working on my prelim at the time. And then subsequently, when I came to America, I did a degree in physical education, concentration on coaching, concentration on soccer coaching. So it just, each step along the way became another experience and level of depth of my coach education. And then in my final year, rather than do my practicum or some of the coaching hours that I needed in the US or the high school, I went to Sheffield United for a year and got to do it with Sheffield United. So I got to work with the U team. I was around the first team, the reserves, top to bottom in the whole club. So at 22 years of age, I was working with a team and a club that was in the Premier, the first division, which was subsequently the following year to become the Premier League. So again, when I look back at 15, I'm around Noel O'Reilly and Vincent Butler. At 22, I'm around Dave Bassett and doing observations at the Man Cities, Man United, Tottenham, all these clubs in England, and playing against them. So that was the start of the coach education pathway.
Excellent. So the time now you're at Quinnipiac, when did that all start?
I was at New Haven. I'd come out of Central, spent a year coaching, as a student coach assistant, volunteer at Central with the men where I played. Again, you want to stay at your alma mater, but I applied and put in for jobs elsewhere. Ended up getting a job at Division 2, University of New Haven. Took over from Joe Macknick. Again, these are small little details where he's a legend in the game, and having him around the program sort of guide me in my first year in college coaching. John Kowalski, people like him had been there, so New Haven was seen as a pathway. And then there's others, there's other coaches in Porky Vieira, who's a legend in baseball, and also Tony, the old Miami Dolphins coach who passed away a couple of years ago. So the future NFL coach is coaching Division II, and you could see Tony Sparagna, you could see in him, like, he was destined for the top. So to be around him for a year, again, at the time you don't appreciate it, but now in hindsight, it's like three Hall of Famers who were all around the program, and the door was open to go in and talk to. So I got 2 years of Division II under my belt. Applied for the Quinnipiac job, which was transitioning from 2 to 1 years. Here I am 20 years later. I got 2 daughters in the school now, part of the furniture field, but it's been a great place to work and grow up and see them grow up. And I hope I'm here. The other 2 want to attend the school too, because it's become a fantastic institution.
I was just about to say that it is a fantastic institution. Having visited and seen it, it's grown over the last 10 years unbelievably, and you're lucky enough to see that growth and then obviously benefit with the new facility. Just touch, Dave, a little bit on your US soccer coaching education background and how that started.
Again, I was going through all the courses, so came back when I was graduated from Central and then playing in the A-League, which was the precursor to MLS. Had the opportunity to take my A and my B license, and in my A license I had John Ellinger, who was the director of coaching, and we did a match analysis assignment, and they were using software for the first time, and my handwritten notes on the game that we watched, the percentage were actually very close to the computer, and that started a conversation about how I watched the game. And and again, that came out of my experience with the likes of Noel White scouting for Alex Ferguson when he was in Ireland, and just the detail that someone like Ferguson required of watching players. So I brought that into my B and my A license, and then Ellinger just said, you need to be getting involved in coach education. So I did my B, did my A, got involved in Connecticut, ended up working up to be the director of coach education in Connecticut. John Ellinger and Bobby Howe put me on the national staff in '98 for coach education. So I've gone C, B, A now. 22 years later, I'm still involved with coach education. And truth be told, John, I mean, most people, sometimes you get to find college coach, club coach, the club rivalries. But for me, going back to my PE days, I'm a teacher at heart. So if there was one thing that I would use to define me, it's more a coach educator than just an on-field coach. So I get a lot out of helping coaches improve, developing, and seeing their career grow.
Excellent. So just moving on then, Dave. Over the years, obviously you're in the game a long time. What would you put down as your best coaching experience and why? It could be either a game related or an in-session education with US soccer, or anything like that you've seen over the years. Yeah,
I mean, there's 2 or 3 that again, I've been doing it full time for a long time, and you start to look at it as you get older. You sort of gravitate away from the games that were wins and losses and more the experiences. So for me, just 5-6 years ago, being able to do a clinic in Cape Town in South Africa, and then getting in a township. Here's a white coach from Ireland via Connecticut in one of the most impoverished places in the world, and doing a clinic with kids that had nothing. The men's coach at Quinnipiac, Eric DaCosta, was with me. And then we left it. I had all the gear, Spurs gear, US gear, and packed it, and just couldn't bring it back. Had to leave it there just because they had nothing. So that was a humbling experience. I think from a non sort of US perspective was, and you were there, John, too, being an assistant with Noel King, and never having played for Ireland, but to stand up when the national anthem, when we're playing the USA in Giant Stadium, that was a proud moment. Philadelphia, Chicago as well. We played 3 games, but to just stand there listening to Aaron Levine, you can't take that away. And then from a US perspective is being at the World Youth Cup in 2018 with Mark Karstaff, just to experience how it works and see FIFA at that level, to go from sort of training in Argentina to then being in a full-blown World Cup in Uruguay, and just the standards was incredible. So it's ticked the box, but want to tick more boxes like that, I'd love to do it again.
Awesome. And then obviously we'll touch on your most difficult or worst moment in coaching, and what did you learn from that?
I'd say my most difficult one, again, 5 years ago, I might have given you a game, but the reality is that we don't look at wins the same way we look at losses, and it just becomes part of the experience, and they're never as bad as you think they are at the time. I would say that my most difficult one ended up probably in hindsight being the best one too. And 3 years ago, one of my players collapsed in practice in the summer in July, in 90-degree heat, and I ended up having to perform CPR for 3 minutes, and she was dead on the field, and then the EMTs revived her. So the emotional toll for the 3 days that she was in intensive care and didn't come out, and her life was in the balance, just just to have everyone around you and to go through it. But then now that she's survived, she'll never come back and play to the same level. But that again, humbling experience. You learn the importance of CPR. You learn the importance of the game's not that big of a deal in the greater scheme of things. So, and my kids were similar in age, so you can tell, like, even 3 years later, still tough to talk about.
Absolutely. What was that young girl's name, Dave?
Lacey Lewis.
How's she doing today? Do you talk to her?
Yeah, she's had, unfortunately for her, she's had a couple of episodes since and operations, but as our parents come in on our birthday, Christmas, drop me off cookies and say hello, and they're just thankful. She never plays a soccer game, basketball game again. They don't care. She's going to live a long life. It would have happened to her eventually. Right. So again, as I say, I think that you try to look at the positives and say, she was in the right place at the right time. Fortunate that I knew CPR. Fortunate that I just recertified. So, but never, to be honest, I never wish that experience on any coach. So it's so that's probably, as I said, the worst experience, and in many ways, the way it happened and the result of it and the outcome, the best one.
Well, I remember it when you talked about it, when you shared it with me, because I think you took a back seat for a few days afterwards, and you were just overwhelmed basically by the whole situation. So I think the girl was very lucky that you were there and you were qualified to take care of her. So, like you say, it was a blessing in disguise, really. Moving on then you've coached numerous players, both internationals, college, club, everywhere. You've seen them, you've witnessed them. Who, without not naming all of them, you can name 3 or 4, but who was the best player you ever coached?
I mean, if I look back and some of the players that I've had the chance to work with in England and even in Ireland, because when I was coaching with Belvedere and O'Connell's, was someone like Kwame Ampadu, was so talented. Went to Arsenal and then played a long career in England. But that's a long time ago. If I look at Quinnipiac, in truth, the best player we've had here was Kirsten Van Der Ven. We had her here for a short period of time. Dutch national team player, played in the 2015 World Cup, captain of Holland, is now head of FIFA women in the KNBB. And she went to Florida State, where she played in a couple of Final Fours. So she made the right decision. But she was a fantastic player. Could do everything, just that sort of everything about Dutch football and what she could do, and had a competitive edge like an Edgar Davids that just tore into tackles. So the year that we had her here and I got to work with her was a bonus. But Tiff Weimer has to come in. Coaches now at Oakwood, played at Penn State, NWSL all over. Was unfortunate that she got cut from a couple of Olympic and World Cup national teams at the last minute. But she's everything that US soccer is looking to produce. From the time I had her at 14-15 with Connecticut ODP, and a few years with World Class, and I still go back to what she can do with a ball, and how she could take over a game. Quick story, she gave up a goal, and I'd been warning her for 3 years she was going to give up a goal the way she tried to flick players on the halfway line. And she did. So we're down 2-0 in the regional semi-final to go to nationals in 99. And I just said, I shook my shoulder and looked at her. And she was crying, and then picked up the ball from the kickoff, went past 5 players, walked around the goalkeeper, put it in. And we went on to win 5-2. And I think she got a hat trick. But she was one of those that just, you can't teach it. You know, it's not, I didn't develop her. As you learn over time that, you know, you just play the parts. You know, whoever had her in North Haven, whoever introduced her to the game, her mom and her grandmother, people at Penn State. But she was a fantastic talent. You know,
is she still involved, Dave, or does she coach?
She's coaching at Oakwood. She went in there before the DA stopped. So she's coaching at Oakwood, and just she took her C, she's taken her B, so she's on that pathway. And much like, you know, we're trying to get players involved. That's a player with a lot of talent that should be involved and loves the game. You know, and more importantly, like, you know, we produce players that tend not to like the game. She loves the game, you know, and still wants to play. And she hasn't seen a defender that she doesn't want to nutmeg.
So in your when you were with Mark Carr with the US team, do you see a player there that's going to come through and finish up with an Olympic medal and a World Cup medal, hopefully down the road?
I think there's players that are capable of it. In many ways, what you learn when you're working with U teams, while the focus is to try and win a U17 World Cup and a U20 World Cup, the reality is that the long-term success of that team is based on how many players will come through. So right now, Mia Fischel's in with the senior team, so she's training in Colorado. So she's gone from that U17 World Cup where she scored in the final at U20 earlier this year in the Dominican when we were there, and she's now training with the team. So Mia has a chance. I think players like Maya Doms, if she develops at Stanford, she can do it as well. And there's one or two others, but a lot will depend over the next 3 years. And I think there's a possibility that team can be judged as successful based on the fact that 3 or 4 come through into the national team.
You've coached a lot. You've used a lot of different things over the years in regards to equipment and training devices and all. From your experience, what do you see out there that's really helped you over the years?
Yeah, it's I look back and I always tell like a couple of stories about I worked with Noel White and Dermot Keeley at Home Farm just after Everton invested $250,000, and they asked me to take a session with the first team, and they gave me a bag of balls with no cones, 3 balls, and we're up at Home Farm, and I was like, well, where's all the equipment? And Dermot's going, well, you're not in America now. And I went, it's not about being in America, it's about being prepared and what's right and wrong in terms of your preparation. Now you're spoiled I got small-sided goals, 3/4 goals, soccer, tennis, nets, cones, this. But I think it's just anything that can help paint the picture. Funnily enough, as I get older, I'm using cones less and less, more the lines of the field. I do like the flat markers that you put down so that you don't have to have cones and look like it's a landing strip. The magnetic boards are always now helpful. I'm always using that, and the coaching pads. I mean, there's one next to my bed. There's always one on a desk. I'm always jotting something down, lineups, formations, sessions, activities. So I think it's anything it's become a resource, much like the computer stuff. But ultimately, that's on the field. The computer's on our desktop and a laptop. But anything that helps us on the field, the better.
All right, just to wrap it up, advice you would give to a young Dave Clarke?
Again, as I said, I started coaching at a young age. And I think right now, looking at what the advice I give to coaches is they get bogged down in the activities and the sessions. And we were all like that. I always wanted to run the best session, and I always wanted people going away going, Clarke sessions are good. You should see it in the warm-up and intricate and all that. I go, you know what? It's all bells and whistles now. Much of it is fluff, and I keep, the notes I have on my sessions from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I scratch my head. But now, going back, I have stories, I have memories of things that I've done, but I didn't focus on them enough. So for me, it would be taking notes more about the coaches, more about what they said, how they said it, the tone of voice, the length of the session, rather than the activity. The activity is easy. You just go online, find the activity. But it's hard to put into words how a coach changes it with one word. So that to me is, I have all the sessions I've ever done. I have a book from, the 80s, 90s with all these sessions written down, and they're basic, but I don't have as many coaching points as I should. And I'll give you one example. I was fortunate that I got to meet Alex Ferguson before he became Alex Ferguson, before the real success at United. So got to spend time with him at the Cliff, Sheffield United beating Fergie. And all I did was focused on a session. Now, when I look back, I go, oh my God, what a missed opportunity, to really sit. And he was an open canvas to me at the time. And I didn't ask him enough questions about the process rather than about the activities. And I think you're still young and you're at Man United watching and observing. He was an Aberdeen legend rather than he had just won the Cup Winners' Cup, or on his way to doing it. It was only his second trophy there. But he was still, based on the people that he worked with in Ireland, one of the best educators in the game. And that was a missed opportunity. Roll back to 99, when I spent time with Bobby Robson at PSV. That's what I ended up doing a lot more of, talking to him and not really focusing on his sessions. And I wish I could go back. I mean, I've no notes on my time with Noel Riley. I've no notes on my time with the Brian Kerrs and the Liam Tuohys and the Vincent Butler, other than the memories of the sessions. So when you look back, that in hindsight, that's a missed opportunity. So that would be my advice. Take better notes and more of the process and how the coaches were and what they said and how they carried themselves, rather than the sessions they did.
Excellent. Good, great advice. Dave, thanks a million for your time. I know you're busy with other things going on there as well. We look forward to talking to you again maybe, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, John. Thanks for all the support down the years. Appreciate it.